Hi, I'm B from Nick's Mechanics. In today's video, I'm going to show you how I 3D modeled Soundwave entirely in Blender. So, as some of you might be aware, I made a Blender animation with Transformers about a month ago. It used a mixture of Voronoi textures, self-shading, stop-mo add-ons to give it a stutter, lots of different tools to give it a sort of classic animation feel. Now, a lot of you, nearly 3,000 of you, really liked that. So I put up a poll asking, hey, I want to do another one, who do you want to see me do? I gave you options of Bumblebee, Soundwave, Optimus Primal, Stick Shot, and Soundwave was the clear winner. Which is perfect, because he's a music-based character, so are Jazz and Blaster. Maybe we could do something that ties them together. So for this animation, I'm almost thinking of it as like a direct continuation. I want all of my Transformer animations to be connected in some fashion, but this one's definitely going to be more so than the others, considering the fact that it literally takes up where we last left off. What do I mean by that? Well, let me show you my storyboard. Yes, it's scrappy and messy, but it gets the point across. So we start off with Jazz coming out of the Ark. Then, Laserbeak follows him. Laserbeak, didn't you? That's right, I 3D printed one not too long ago, which means I can reuse the CAD on that to just animate with. I don't need to spend hours modeling it again. Laserbeak flies out, lands into Soundwave in his tape deck mode. He plays back the message that Jazz and Blaster received in the previous one from Optimus Prime. Then he transforms. He goes to walk away, but Blaster, who was just left on the floor in the previous animation, is still in the Ark. He spots him, and a fight ensues. Then we have an epic fight scene, using mixtures of sound from the G1 cartoon and possibly some 80s hits. We'll see if I get copyright claimed or not. But just when all hope seems lost for Blaster, Jazz comes in, transforming and duking it out. And together, Blaster and him team up, doing things such as a fastball special, very X-Men, and overall just having a really fun time. Now, obviously this fight scene is going to be a bit more intricate than this, it's the main point of the animation, but honestly, I just want to animate and go with the flow, so this is just insert fight scene here. There's gonna be more to it later. Eventually, Soundwave gets a message from Megatron telling him, oi, get over it, and so he flies away, leaving Jazz and Blaster to get to where Optimus is asking them in the previous one. All of this to say, it's gonna be a very elaborate fight scene that's hopefully gonna be very fun. Now, I am not gonna get the entire thing done in one day, let alone a week, so this is gonna be part one of multiple parts. Now, hopefully I'm going to get them out semi-regularly, but we'll see. My upload schedule's all over the place lately. But for part one, I'm going to show you how I modeled Soundwave. Now, this is how I start all of my Transformers. It's in alt mode, because when you do that first, you can chop it up into sections to give the robot mode kibble later on that stays in the correct proportions, rather than if you model them separately. Now, Soundwave's alt mode is a cassette player, and that's basically just a glorified cube in this case, so I'm going to get plenty of reference material and get to work. Now, I often start in a different way to most modelers. I like to do it flat as a sheet, and then extrude it outwards from there, almost as if I was drawing it, sketching all the key lines that I need. Once that's done, I extrude it out and start refining from there. Most of Soundwave's details are fairly simple, but he does have a Decepticon badge right smack in the center. And I'm probably going to want to use that a few times, as well as an Autobot badge, because I might want to do cartoon transitions or just slap it on the other characters. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get an image of that, trace it out like I was doing before with the drawing styles, and then I can just copy paste that and parent it to the main object, and that way it'll follow around as stuck on a badge. It's going to be really useful, trust me. So his alt mode's basically done. There's not a lot to it, but we need to make sure that it can turn into a robot. So for Soundwave, a lot of his components are very obvious, right? He's got the waist here, he's got the legs there. So what I'm going to do is just select all of that and then separate it. Then I can move that around, not changing the scale or anything for it, so that it's in the right spot. Now, for the robot mode, I'm going to just add some completely new features, such as, you know, the legs need to have slightly wider bits here, they need the feet, don't forget the arms, and of course the head. So a lot of this stuff, I'm going to try and use as much of the alt mode as I can to build out the robot mode, and then the bits I'm missing, I'm then going to go in afterwards. Now, the way I tend to do my Transformers is actually make 3 models. I make the alt mode, which I then cut up into the robot mode, which I then squish most of the way back into alt mode, but also add some extra pieces so it could transform better. Then when I animate, I usually try to swap between these models. The alt mode is good for if you just want, say, you know, Jazz's car driving along. You don't need all the extra topology of a robot that's hidden inside. But you don't also want a robot mode that's got lots of extra pieces you'll never see when it needs to transform. So when you're animating, you could just swap to the model you need for the right situation. Now, unfortunately, I didn't have time to do the mid-transform model for this one, but Soundwave's robot mode is basically there. Now, you'll notice that throughout this entire process, he's already colored in most of the way. How did I get all these funky textures? Well, I'm still working in the base file that had Blaster and Jazz in, which means all of those textures I made a month ago using Voronoi and the material nodes and various other shader elements, I could just copy paste here. If you want to figure out how I made those textures, check out the video linked somewhere up here. One thing I'm very proud of is that the machine gun on his shoulder actually has the circle holes in the correct position, all mathematically. How I did that is I made a loop cut all the way around, adding an extra line. Then, for each half point and quarter point with the vertices, I could just snap my cursor to that, then snap a cylinder to the cursor, do a boolean cut, and then do that all the way around each vertice. And of course, because the loop cut mathematically makes the vertices in the correct spots, when I just drag the cursor there and then drag the cylinder there, it all works out perfectly. There's probably an easier way to do it, but I don't know that, so this is what I did, and it works really well. Now his head. His head is particularly hard because Soundwave's proportions are very distinct, and in the end I decided my lack of being able to copy gives it a unique style, which I'm just gonna lean into. I mean, my Jazz has got wheel shoulders, my Blaster's got funky proportions on the legs. Why can't Soundwave's head be slightly different? Now, I want Soundwave to feel more angry and strong than he usually is. Usually? I want to make Soundwave feel more angry and strong than he usually is, which means that his chest's a bit wider, and for his head, I want to make his horns spikier, make him actually seem like a proper threat. Soundwave always does, but I want to make him seem like it's hard to win against this guy. Of course, I made sure things like his visor had a red emission coming off so they glow. His mouth plate was particularly tricky because it's actually rounded, it's not harsh like Optimus Prime's, so there was a lot of tweaking here or there. And of course, make sure it looks good from all angles. It doesn't matter if it looks great from the front, make sure you do the back and sides. Now, what I usually tend to do for stuff like this is I use lots of different blocks, usually using a single vert, which I then extrude to the shapes I need with a mirror modifier. But I need to make sure that it all moves as one piece, like it's a head. So I make it all parented to something I can easily grab. In this instance, it was his mouth plate, 'cause it's the biggest piece on the face. Now, when I just move the mouth plate, the rest of the head moves with it as if it's one block, when it's actually like 5, all sort of floating around. For things like his hands, I just copy-pasted them from my Optimus Prime I made several months ago now. I am never modeling hands again if I don't have to. The only time I might is if it's Shockwave and he's got like a gun hand or something, which even then doesn't involve fingers, so I don't mind. So I might not have been able to get all of him finished today, but I did manage to get him rigged. Rigging is super easy for these sort of Transformers that I make because you can just parent to bone. Because all of his sections, his waist, his arms, his hands, each finger segment is all a different block. So what that means is that I can make the armature only doing one half, but naming each bone .L so I can symmetrize. And then once they line up with the blocks, I can just select the block, select the bone, parent to bone, and now it just follows it. There's no need for weight painting, there's no trying to make the blocks perfectly stretch. I've done this before on the Optimus Prime. It took me weeks to get that sorted. This took me minutes. Please, use this strategy if you're also making Transformers. Now, making the rig isn't particularly hard, but you do need to make sure he's got inverse kinematics in the legs. So that means that we need a IK heel and an IK pole. For those who don't know what inverse kinematics is, the easiest way to explain it is this. If I have my arm out, and I grab my hand, and I move that around, you notice how the rest of my arm moves with it? Well, that's what inverse kinematics does. It tells Blender what the rest of the arm should do, it calculates it. Which means that when you're doing it on legs, and you're doing run cycles and stuff like that, you just need to move the feet, and Blender will figure out the rest for you. It's really useful. Only problem is I can never remember how to do it right off the bat. My main issue is that I had the IK heel and pole both parented to the original structure, because I extruded them out from it. Which means that when you tell it, okay, I want to use this heel as the end of the chain and then have the rest of it go up to the hip, because it's connected when it's trying to calculate it, it ends up moving it with it, it's all connected, it's trying to calculate it, but it's connected and moving and it ends up having a headache with itself, and does this. Nearly every time I rig someone with IK, they end up having a moment where their leg does this. What's really weird though is that the first leg worked fine, even though I did it wrong on the first leg. But the second leg? I don't know what happened, but it was brokey. But with that all sorted, I finally have Soundwave finished. Now, as I said, this is only part 1, so there's plenty more to come, but in the meantime, enjoy these awesome renders. Doesn't he look menacing? It's my first Decepticon I've done in Blender, and I'm very proud of the results. Next video, we're going to be rigging up that 3D printed laser beak I did a little while back. We're also going to be making the mid-transform for Soundwave, and if I'm lucky, I might be able to make some of the terrain, but we'll see. So if you enjoyed what you see, feel free to give me a subscribe, it really helps. We're over 500 now, this is kinda cool. And I hope I see you next time. Farewell! Just want to say thank you to everyone that stuck with me while I've had a hiatus. It's been really frustrating seeing the numbers just sort of dwindle, but everyone who's subscribed has stayed subscribed, and it's really nice to have this awesome community that's just waiting for when I eventually pop up again. It's awesome. I really appreciate it, and thank you. Let's just hope it doesn't take me another month to upload again.